You need to hear this if you're a history buff. Imagine diving into an alternate timeline where one of the most catastrophic events in human history never took place. The Black Plague, also known as the Black Death, was a pandemic that swept through Europe in the 14th century, wiping out an estimated 30 million people. But what if it never happened? Imagine Europe without one of its darkest tragedies. No Black Plague. The streets would be bustling with life, and the air would be filled with the sounds of a thriving society. The absence of this devastating event would have far-reaching consequences, altering the course of history in ways we can only begin to imagine. Without the Black Plague, Europe's population wouldn't have faced such a sharp decline. Imagine a world where the population kept growing. The bustling markets would be even more crowded, and the cities would be teeming with people. The demographic landscape of Europe would be vastly different, with a much larger and more diverse population. Cities would have expanded faster, and medieval Europe would be buzzing with activity. The construction of new buildings, roads, and infrastructure would be in full swing as the demand for housing and services grew. The architectural landscape of Europe would be more advanced, with grander and more elaborate structures dotting the skyline. The lack of such a massive death toll would have meant more workers for fields and factories, pushing the economy forward at breakneck speed. The agricultural sector would flourish, with more hands to till the soil and harvest the crops. The workshops and factories would be bustling with activity, producing goods at an unprecedented rate. Agriculture, construction, and trade would be thriving, with towns growing into cities much earlier. The economic boom would lead to increased trade, both within Europe and with other parts of the world. The exchange of goods, ideas, and cultures would accelerate, fostering a more interconnected and prosperous society. But without the Black Plague, the power dynamics might look very different. The feudal system, which was already under strain, might have persisted longer. The lords and nobles would retain their grip on power, while the peasants and serfs continued to toil under their rule. The labor shortages caused by the plague gave peasants a rare chance to demand better wages and rights. Without this leverage, the social and economic mobility of the lower classes would be severely limited. The gap between the rich and the poor would widen, and the struggle for equality and justice would be even more arduous. Without it, the feudal system may have held on longer, and the average person's quality of life might not have improved as quickly. The rigid social hierarchy would stifle innovation and progress as the majority of the population remained trapped in a cycle of poverty and servitude. And what about the Renaissance? This period of cultural rebirth and intellectual awakening was, in part, a response to the profound changes brought about by the Black Plague. The trauma and loss experienced by society led to a renewed interest in art, science, and philosophy synergy. Some historians believe the plague sparked this cultural explosion by changing perspectives on life and death. The existential crisis prompted by the pandemic led people to seek new ways of understanding the world and their place in it. The Renaissance was a time of great creativity and innovation, as artists and thinkers pushed the boundaries of what was possible. Without the trauma of the plague, would artists and thinkers have still sought new ways of expression, or might the Renaissance have been delayed by decades? The absence of this catalyst could have resulted in a slower and less dramatic cultural transformation. The masterpieces of Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo, and Raphael might never have been created, and the scientific discoveries of Copernicus and Galileo could have been postponed. With a larger booming population, Europe's interest in exploring new territories could have started even sooner. The drive to find new lands and resources would be fueled by the growing population and the need for expansion. The age of exploration might have begun earlier, with European explorers setting sail for distant shores. Imagine Europe reaching the Americas or Africa earlier with more resources and people. The impact on the indigenous populations of these regions would be profound, as the arrival of Europeans brought with it new technologies, diseases, and cultural practices. The course of history in the Americas and Africa would be dramatically altered, with far-reaching consequences for the development of these continents. How would that have impacted indigenous populations or the development of these regions? The earlier arrival of Europeans could have led to more rapid colonization and exploitation of resources. the indigenous cultures and societies would face even greater challenges in preserving their way of life and resisting the encroachment of foreign powers. Medicine would look different too. The Black Plague was a turning point in the history of medicine as doctors and scientists sought to understand and combat the disease. The pandemic spurred advancements in medical knowledge and practices that laid the foundation for modern public health. The Black Plague forced doctors to innovate, eventually leading to quarantine practices and sparking the beginning of modern public health. The concept of isolating the sick to prevent the spread of disease was a revolutionary idea that emerged from the necessity of dealing with the plague. This practice would become a cornerstone of public health efforts in the centuries to come. Without the pandemic, the advancements in medical practices may have been slower, leaving us more vulnerable to later diseases. The lack of urgency and necessity might have delayed the development of critical medical techniques and knowledge. Future pandemics and outbreaks could have been even more devastating without the lessons learned from the Black Plague. So, if the Black Plague had never happened, we might see a Europe with a stronger feudal system, delayed cultural advances, slower medical development, and even an earlier push toward colonization. The ripple effects of this alternate history would be felt across every aspect of society, from the economy to politics to culture. Every part of life, from the economy to exploration, would look different. The trajectory of human history would be altered in countless ways, as the absence of the Black Plague reshaped the world in ways we can only speculate about. The Black Plague was devastating, but it forced humanity to adapt and innovate in ways we still feel today. The resilience and ingenuity of people in the face of such a catastrophe led to profound changes that have shaped the modern world. Sometimes history's darkest moments can shape the world in unimaginable ways. The challenges and hardships of the past have often been the catalysts for progress and transformation, leading to a better and more advanced society. Subscribe for more historical what-ifs. Join us as we continue to explore the fascinating and thought-provoking alternate histories that make us question what might have been.